Whole brain thinking arises from cognitive activity, which perfectly balances the right and left hemispheres of your brain. To best explain, allow me to take a diversion and tell you of Earth's ancient, multidimensional history. Before Earth fell into the present day, third-dimensional vibration, in fact, even before Earth fell into the fourth dimension, there were no polarities. Male and female, proton and electron, receiving and projecting, were the same. The polarization of masculine and feminine started with the atom, which is why the first polarized human was named Adam. Long before the fall of Atlantis, when Gaia was still fifth-dimensional, there was a continent, which filled much of your Pacific Ocean, named Lemuria. In the Lemurian era, there was only unity consciousness. Hence, there were no polarities, and all beings were androgynous. Interestingly enough, it was the Lemurians who first started to experiment with creating a being polarized into a gender of male or female. Lower dimensional life. The Lemurians experimented with creating a lower dimensional being, as they knew that Gaia had volunteered to find the lowest dimension in which sentient life could survive. The Lemurians began their polarization experiments by splitting the atom into the polarities of positive proton male charge and feminine electron female charge. They decided to make their lower dimensional human male, as they thought that the dynamic action of the masculine charge would be vital for a society split off from the oneness of the fifth dimension. For some reason, they did not consider having both male and female beings. Perhaps this was because they were having such trouble finding any being at all that could survive in such a low resonance. The Lemurians, who changed forms as easily as you'd change your clothes, viewed having only one form as a foreign concept. However, their telepathic group mind told them that the destiny of the planet was that the frequency of energy was going to drop drastically. They had worked out every possible solution for this impending cataclysm, but it was written in the planetary hologram, and they could not change it. Therefore, they knew that they would have to assist in creating an Earth form that could survive within a low dimension, possibly as low as the third dimension. Eventually, believing that their experiments had failed, they passed their research on to the Atlanteans. They did this largely because the holographic writings said it was the Atlanteans who would be responsible for causing the great catastrophe. Going underground. The Lemurians came to peace with the fact that some of them would go underground until they could adjust their vibration to the resonant frequency in which the planet finally stabilized. This frequency ended up being the third dimension. It took millennia before the gracious higher dimensional forms could create a polarized, third-dimensional body with edges of flesh and foundations of bones. The Lemurian scientists did discover, though, that bones could hold their history, as bones seem to be more durable than any other third-dimensional, biological form. They believed, or hoped, that they could embed the history of their Lemurian civilization in the DNA of the bone marrow of the form they would ultimately take. In that manner, their history would endure in the buried bones long past the limited lifespan of a lower dimensional being. The Lemurians found that they could actually hide this information in the 97% of DNA that Western scientists have labeled as junk. Since this junk DNA could create a form of language, which worked on the same tenet as language, the Lemurians knew that no one would think to even look in the buried bones of their ancestors until the civilization had become quite advanced. Hopefully, that civilization would be advanced enough to use the great Lemurian secrets only for creation and not for destruction. However, if their secrets were to be stored in bones, some of them would have to hold physical forms, until the next entry into the photon belt over 12,000 years later. The other Lemurians would return to their multidimensional self and their oversoul to share all their wonderful adventures. Some Lemurians volunteered to oversee Earth and guide those who could raise their consciousness enough to communicate with them. These Lemurians would keep the resonance an octave or two higher than that of the polarized humans. This resonance ended up being the middle and upper fourth dimension. A third group of Lemurians would go deep into the caves and caverns of Earth to slowly lower their vibration to match Gaia's. These are the ones who would eventually take on a third-dimensional form. Only the most evolved Lemurians were chosen for this task, as the seers knew that the challenges of falling into the dark polarity would be immense. Polarization of humanity. When, indeed, the vibratory rate of the planet dropped into the lower fourth, and finally into the third dimension, the polarization of the beings, later known as humanity, was complete. The Atlanteans had, indeed, been very instrumental in creating the experience of polarized individuality. They experimented with many lower vibrational beings by creating a combination of spirit/androgynous human and animal that had been polarized into a gender. In the end, it was the selfishness and cruelty of these experiments that proved to actually lower their vibration. You see, in the oneness of the upper fourth and fifth dimension, everyone shares feelings, thoughts, and experiences with everyone else. Because of this, no one would harm another, or they would harm themselves, as well. However, certain Atlantean scientists discovered a form of dark magic that allowed them to shield themselves from the pain of others. They did this by finding ways to temporarily extinguish their light by turning off their Atma, the threefold flame of life in their heart. This was dangerous, indeed, for their soul could leave their body while their Atma was turned off. Nonetheless, if they turned it on again in time, they could return their soul to their body. Unfortunately, they didn't learn until much later that their vibration became lower and lower, each time they performed this magic. Finally, their soul left their body, as the vibration was too low, and they became earth vessels without a soul. Without their souls integrated within their bodies, they could do anything to anyone without feeling the other person's pain. This is how cruelty began. When they ended up at a vibration within the 3D resonance, they found that they had different bodies. Some of them had a male polarized body with a more projective aggressive intellectual essence, while others had a female polarized form with a more receptive creative emotional essence. A polarized planet. When the entire planet became third-dimensional, everyone who chose to stay with Gaia had a third-dimensional form. Also, everyone had a form that was either male or female. Unfortunately, the first ones to be lowered to the third dimension were the ones who had practiced dark magic. These are the same ones who had learned about cruelty, and they had been there much longer, and knew the rules of survival in 3D reality. Hence, the Dark Ones became the leaders. With these ruthless Dark Ones in power, there was such cruelty and pain that the human species was in danger of extinction. There were priests and priestesses from Atlantis who had decided to live in the third dimension, but they kept to themselves and cared little about the common people. Therefore, a call went out into the higher dimensions to find light beings who would be willing to take form with the common people to balance the darkness. Fortunately, many light beings answered the call. Unfortunately, many of them became lost to the darkness. However, a few of them were strong enough to stay in their light. Hence, the polarization between light and dark began. This polarity expanded as the light beings did loving power within things, and the dark beings did fearful power over others things. The light beings could only survive by constantly pulling in power from the higher vibrational light forces. This force was later to be known as grace, prana, and/or unconditional love. On the other hand, the Dark Ones pulled power from the essence of other 3D humans. The Dark Ones were so extremely merciless that the terrified common people would allow their essence to leave their tormented bodies in the presence of these ruthless leaders. The Dark Ones would then steal that essence for themselves. This experience of being tormented later became known as fear. In this manner, love and fear became polarities. As the planet became more and more polarized, the vibratory rate became lower and lower. The Dark Ones knew that if they could make the planet's vibration low enough, all the light beings would have to leave or risk falling into the darkness. Therefore, they remained as cruel as they possibly could. They found that they liked to have power over people, animals, and even over the planet which housed them. Return of the Lemurians. The Lemurians were finally able to take 3D bodies and became the native peoples such as the Native Americans, the Inuits, Some, known as Laplanders, Polynesians, Aborigines, Maori, and other indigenous peoples of Africa and South America. To this day, these offspring of the Lemurians serve the goddess Earth and respect the old traditions that were once Lemurian. Unfortunately, these societies eventually became conquered peoples, as they were no match for the cruelty of Dark Ones, who knew no unity with others, with the planet, or with their own waning light. The Lemurians waited again. They would never lose their connection with the land and with Gaia, and would secretly use their rituals and ceremonies to protect Earth. Some Lemurians took forms of water beings, such as the cetaceans. Fortunately, because the Lemurian soul was one with Gaia, they were also one with the galaxy. Because of this, they knew of the impending entry of the Great Light when they entered the Aquarian Age arm of the photon belt. These Lemurian descendants would have to just hold on until Gaia approached the photon belt and the frequency of the planet began to rise. Note from Sue, that time is now. At that point, the forces of darkness would have to either take on more light, or become extinct with the rest of the declining third dimension. Note, this event is also occurring now. The Lemurians were not intent on punishing anyone, as through their connection with Gaia, they could also connect with all that is. Within unity consciousness, there is no need to punish others, as there are no others. There is only the oneness. This oneness fills the photon belt, and the Lemurians knew it. They also knew that the light of the photon belt would gradually depolarize the planet. The spectrum between feminine negative charge and masculine positive charge would then gradually become smaller and smaller until the balance of male and female would take place. At that point, all polarized charge would be taken from Gaia, and hence, from all her inhabitants. Balancing polarities. Since Gaia is a hologram, all of Earth's inhabitants have her light within them, just as Gaia has the light of Earth's inhabitants within her. The place in the human body that holds the key to the balancing of the male and female polarities is in the sacred triangle of the brain. The inner marriage of the male and female polarities, the mystical marriage within the sacred triangle, balances the polarities in the brain. Once these polarities are balanced, whole brain thinking is activated. The pineal and pituitary glands are polarized, in that the pineal gland is feminine/receptive, and the pituitary gland is masculine/projective. Therefore, once these two glands can share, combine, and merge their essence in the third ventricle of the brain, the charges/polarities are gradually balanced in the earth vessels of all life on Gaia. Of course, nothing will actually be taken away. Just as the balance of male and female polarities equates a fully charged battery, a balance of male and female in the brain equates a fully charged biological computer. Without the imbalance caused by masculine and feminine polarities, males and females will become androgynous. The right hemisphere negative electron and the left hemisphere positive proton will blend into the whole brain. In the same now, the third eye will open to see the true vision, which will flash into the high heart to activate the Atma of unity of infinite wisdom, multidimensional power, and unconditional love. As the third eye and the high heart merge into one, the fifth dimensional light body will flash forward to perceive, believe, and inhabit the fifth dimensional expression of Gaia's dear planet Earth. Those humans, many of them were initially Lemurian, have completed a very long journey through life-death on the wheel of incarnation. Oh, the unity of meeting your true family who can only be perceived, believed, and joined via your true, light body self. Meanwhile, your DNA holds the memory of being androgynous, multidimensional beings of light. As your brains return to the balance of masculine and feminine, the new biological computer will activate, and you will begin the journey home to the fifth dimension and beyond. Note, this part is definitely now. Starship Earth, the mothership, with millions of small light vessels, light bodies, will begin the great galactic tour. Don't miss the voyage. It promises to be out of this world. Bon voyage Gaia. You deserve a vacation.